You know, Bert, I had a little time on my hands the other day, and I decided to count the times that you said the word holy on our show.
And?
In 120 episodes, you said holy exactly 370 times.
Holy, holy!
Make that 372.
Now, what about this next episode?
I guess we'll have to get out our bat calculators and see.
Stay tuned.
We have previously seen, in a jewelry shop, an antique clock that does more than tell time. Second hands in a split-second robbery. The mental mainspring of this timetable of crime, the Clock King. Bat burgers at a drive-in. Bat burgers? Now it's the Clock King, disguised as a pop artist. Batman and Robin pop into the picture. The dynamic duo caught in the coils of time. Batman finds the Clock King's watch. A trail in the dust. Batman and Robin find Clock King's hideout. Blackjacks find the dynamic duo. And they find they're trapped in a giant hourglass. The Clock King's watch was a trap. Holy Sahara! And their utility belts out of reach. Meanwhile, the sands of time pour down with relentless force. Is this to be the Caped Crusaders' final adventure? In one moment, we'll come face to face with the moment of truth.
Welcome back, citizens, to an all-new episode of the Batcave podcast. It's your old bat chum, John S. Drew here, and we're back with a new episode of the Batcave podcast with another review, this time looking at another of the odd second season villains created possibly to just bring in guest stars, but I don't know, in this case we might have something a little different here. The episodes we're talking about are the Clock King's Crazy Crimes and the Clock King Gets Crowned, and we're moving further and further away from the rhyming couplets that we have for the titles like we had in the first season here. These two episodes aired on October 12th and 13th, 1966, so we're well into the second season now of Batman. And joining me to talk about this new villain is a returning guest host. Once again, sitting in here in the Batcave is Mr. Keith R.A. DeCandido. Hey, Keith, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm ready to talk about Batman again, which I never thought I'd be doing ever, but yeah.
Well, you mean ever again or ever in general?
No, just in general. I mean, it's just musing on the wacky world of podcasting and where it has led both of us. Oh. Basically, transferring all the ridiculous conversations that you and I have been having since high school and actually, subjecting other people to them.
Yes.
But
no, and it's funny, too, because I think about how a lot of times if the conversations did veer towards certain things that maybe you weren't interested or I weren't interested in, we'd be polite to each other and we'd listen or what have you for a while. Yeah. But now it's like, okay, if you don't want to hear it, that's okay. I've got hundreds, tens, I don't know, of others, bunches who will in a podcast. Yes, that's what podcasting does. It subjects people to our interests.
Our geek rants and raves.
Exactly. Now, you chose this episode when I put the list together.
Yes.
What was it about the episode, or just...
It wasn't the episode specifically, although, as it turns out, I discovered something on rewatching it that made it even cooler. It was more an interest in the villain. The Clock King is a villain who I always thought was interesting, and has had a lot of different incarnations, both in the comics and on screen. And I thought, as gimmicky villains go, it was an interesting one. In particular, I liked the interpretation they did on the Batman animated series in the 90s, as well as the more recent version of it. They actually had a version of the Clock King on Arrow recently that was based on the most recent comic version of it that was played by Robert Knepper. And they did a really nice job with it. So it was more interest in revisiting, because it had been a while since I'd seen the episode, in how they did the Clock King on Batman. And it was fun. You know, Slezak was a very entertaining choice. And it was an interesting, an interesting little variation on the theme.
What I thought was interesting also was that, like you said, this is a character who was created in the comics. He'd appeared before. This wasn't one of these ones, because my argument is that a lot of the villains, because they moved away from the comic books, they moved away from the characters, they moved away from the stories, and they tried to create their own works. And oftentimes it failed miserably because they were trying to suit a character to an actor, or they were trying to suit a situation to, whoever the guest star was. It just wasn't the right fit. And yet here we have Clock King, and you said there was something else so interesting that you discovered. You want to reveal that as well? I'll leave that one to you.
The episode was co-scripted by Bill Finger. Bill Finger is the guy who co-created Batman with Bob Kane. He's also actually the guy who created the Clock King. I think it was All-Star Comics, or I forget. One of the secondary titles that various DC characters appeared in. And he actually was originally created as a villain specifically for Robin. But Finger created him, too, and did a lot of work on the early Batman comics. While Bob Kane legally is the one who gets all the credit for creating Batman, Finger collaborated with Kane on it. He was the one who did most of the scripting and came up with a lot of the specifics and the concepts and such. He's, credited with creating a lot of the villains, not just the Clock King, but also Joker and some of the others. And as far as I know, this is the only time somebody who worked on the comics wrote for the TV show.
I believe you're right. I don't think anybody else from the comic books got to, participate in the TV show itself. Finger, fortunately, in, recent months, has been getting more attention for his collaboration. And I think DC Comics is finally, stepping forward and I don't know if in the comic books themselves or...
Legally they can't. That's just it. Right. I mean, because of the deal Bob Kane made. Yeah, but they're taking other steps to try to acknowledge it. There's actually a documentary being put together about it that ran on Kickstarter that I believe made its goal to give Finger proper credit. Finger also, at the time the Batman series was airing, was getting involved in screenwriting. He'd written a bunch of movies and had written scripts for Hawaii Five-0 and 77 Sunset Strip. So it's not like it's not like they just pulled him out of the comics pile. He was already out there doing teleplay work and screenplay work already. So he had that and the Batman connection. So.
And, like you said, he was responsible. He had a hand in Batman's creation, had a hand in Joker's creation. One thing in reading up on him is that, a number of sites said this, was that Bob Kane's original concept was actually Birdman. Finger talked him out of it. He even suggested, the basic costume and that it should be a bat. A bat is more imposing as a, someone trying to get at the underworld and such than a bird.
Yeah.
But the really interesting thing that I didn't realize was that Bill Finger also, in a lot of his work in the Batman series, had this penchant for having giant props. He's the one that really got that whole thing rolling with the giant penny that you see in the Batcave or the dinosaur and stuff like that. And, it continues in this episode. I mean, we get a giant hourglass.
Right.
So I thought that was really cool that he was able to make those connections there and bring them into the TV, sort of like bringing a taste of the comic books, and a real taste of the comic books, I should say, into the TV series. Which also, again, and I've been railing on this more and more lately, is that the whole, Batman the TV series ruined the comic book. And I'm thinking, and others have agreed with me on this. No, Batman was a reflection of the comic book at the time. Now it may have gone too far. You could argue that definitely, that it may have gone too far and made it even more ridiculous than even the comic books. That's possible. And there's definitely examples to hold up. But to say that this was a show that didn't get Batman or understand the concept is totally off base, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Certainly the Batman comics that were being created in the 50s and 60s. Yeah, Batman was, especially in the Jerry Robinson days and such, and Batman's being attacked by a giant typewriter and, other bizarre things. It was perfectly in keeping with that. The grim and gritty Batman didn't really start coming back in again until Denny O'Neil took over in the 70s, and part of that was a backlash against the TV show. But that was after the TV show had gone off the air.
Right. Well, why don't we get into discussing this episode here? And we start off right from the start. It's a very, straightforward setup. We get a crime. Clock King's men are moving into position. We have this jewelry store where, these jewels are being shown, and there's a clock in the store that the owner has just purchased. Clock King activates a gas. Everybody gets knocked out. The men move in. And I like the fact that the goons have a sort of theme to them. I mean, he's the timekeeper, so they've got, they're all his second hands, his assistants, right, which is cool. And then the only thing I was a little surprised about was that he had 1 and 3, and later on I think we see, not 1 and 3, 3 and 5, and later on we see 8. I got this impression we were going to get even more goons, like really coming at Batman, and it was only those 3 throughout the whole episode.
Although, sometimes there were 3 of them, sometimes there were 2 of them. It's like, well, the third one kept, coming in and out, depending on whether they needed him or not.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a common feature on Batman. Yeah. But when you go to that distinction, like, why didn't they just call them 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah.
Because Clock King was 1.
Yeah.
So, which if you notice on his, I guess you'd call it his smoking jacket that he wears in the hideout, you can see the hand is pointing to 1. He's number 1.
Of course.
They get away. And of course, Commissioner Gordon and Chief O'Hara, in their typical way of coming to conclusions, realize that because the clock was there and the perfect timing during the day, it must be the work of the Clock King.
Yes, and obviously they are completely incompetent to handle this and must immediately call Batman.
Immediately. There's no choice. Yeah.
I love the fact that throughout the entire run of the show, we never actually saw the Gotham City Police Department do police work.
No, they didn't.
No,
other than the coming in for the arrest.
Yes.
That was it.
They handle the paperwork. That's
the paperwork. Now,
and what I liked about this episode in particular is they're kind of aware of it in a way. I mean, there's one line at the end of part 2 when Chief O'Hara says, "I couldn't have done it better myself," and Adam West is barely reining in the sarcasm when he said, "Thank you, Chief O'Hara. That's high praise."
Yeah. Well, this was funny too because, and I know we're jumping ahead a little bit there, but usually, we get something like Batman going, "No offense to you, Chief O'Hara, Commissioner Gordon," but and he cuts them off. We're going to get a scene later on where Aunt Harriet dresses them down about how they're not as good as Batman.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. Now, here we see. And in a way, because in the last few episodes, I've been arguing about this, that the series is cutting corners. They're doing things like after the crime is done, the bat phone rings, Bruce Wayne immediately picks it up. Or Alfred will pick it up and say, I'll go get him. And Bruce runs in or something like at that moment. Like they don't have anything there showing the home life of Bruce like they did in the first season. They're cutting corners to have more story time for Batman and it's less for Bruce Wayne. The problem is the whole scene with Bruce, Dick, and Aunt Harriet as they're playing chess is so weird.
Yeah.
I don't pay enough attention to the 2 of you.
Oh, you do. You do.
Just run along and enjoy yourself, Aunt Harriet. We'll be fine. Check.
Bat phone, sir. The bat phone.
Oh, that was perfect timing.
It's so weird as Bruce is sitting there going, no, Aunt Harriet, we love spending time with you. And he's just overplaying it. And you're like wondering, was there something else that should have set that whole thing up there?
Yeah, you're wondering if there's like a cut scene or something. It felt a little awkward, but it was good to see that. And in this episode in particular, you needed it because there was the whole, because later on Aunt Harriet actually plays at least a minor role in the actual story, which is, a nice change for her.
Oh, no, absolutely. I agree with that. But you wonder, though.
And that chess scene helps set it up, too. So
it helps. I guess it does. But I think the missing scene would have helped set it up even better. But I guess it may be it was cut for time.
Or maybe they just, the director was having a bad day and blocked everything funny. I don't know. It was just weird.
Yeah. Yeah. We get to him taking the call, and oddly enough, he says, and in a way, I shouldn't say oddly enough. I guess it does make sense. When you're dealing with a man who deals with time, you don't want to waste time going to Police Commissioner Gordon's office. You want to head straight to the scene of the crime.
Yeah, that fit the mode of the episode. And there were plenty of other scenes in the commissioner's office anyway. So
yeah.
in this part, so it's not like Gordon and O'Hara were shortchanged. So.
No, you're right. You're right. So Batman and Robin head for the jewelry store. They, watch the clock and such, looking at it and such. And we cut to the scene with Clock King, and we meet his mole.
Excellent. Every move right on schedule.
Just look at all these goodies. You're marvelous, Clock King.
That, my dear, is because I plan every move like a timetable. As my arch enemies, Batman and Robin, will soon find out, to their detriment. Thinking. Every minute, every second. Thinking. Men, you've done well. I'm proud of you.
Thanks, Your Highness.
Ah, I see it is almost the hour. Zero, -7, 6, 5.
Here it comes again.
3, 2, 1, 0.
Out of all the, moles that any villain has ever had, this one is the most annoying and the most useless.
I don't know if she's the most annoying, but she is pretty useless, yes.
Lovely. What an exquisite, exciting rhapsody of sound. Millie, back to your dusting.
That's all she's doing is going around dusting things. Or when later on he tells her, I've got a really important job for you. I want you to stay here and keep an eye out on things. And as he walks away, she's like, stay here and keep an eye. I don't know if I can remember all that, And
yeah.
she says it so straight-faced. And it's just... and I've railed against this many, many times before, the sexism, the downgrading of women, but this one is just complete airheaded bubbleness, and it's not even like it serves a purpose to the plot. It's just she's a dumb woman, and here she is. Yeah. She's cute.
To be fair, the henchmen aren't exactly the brightest bulbs in the socket either, but...
Well, no, they're not when they leave the wrong button in place later on.
Yeah.
But I love... some of the lines that Slezak spouts out, including where he refers to Batman and Robin as the flatfoots in the sands of time.
Yes.
That is just awesome. I forget what the other one was that he called them, but that was one thing. I didn't feel that the working in of time into the dialogue was overused. Did you?
No, there were plenty of other things that were, played a little too broadly, but I thought it was nicely done. The theme of time actually worked throughout the whole thing. In particular, I liked, and again, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but in part 2, when they're cutting back and forth between Clock King stealing the pocket watches and Batman running names on the computer, and of course we have to get, the narrator, meanwhile, back in the Batcave, meanwhile, because he has to say that every time. It was a nice play on how, things were happening all at once and jumping back and forth in a way that, is fairly common in the comics, but you don't see in television as often because you don't want to switch scenes so much. But just in general, the theme of time and of clocks was well played, I thought, generally throughout the episode. And I loved, because it was such a nice character touch, I loved when Clock King had to pause because we hit the top of the hour and he had to listen to all his clocks ring the hour out at once while the various henchfolks are sitting there covering their ears in agony, waiting for the bells to stop, while he's just reveling in it. He thinks it's the best thing ever. And that's just such a nice character touch. It shows his obsession in what passes for understated in William Dozier's world. It shows, what we're dealing with here. This is a guy whose world is completely overwhelmed and run by clocks and by time.
I liked it, and I also liked the fact that first I thought, couldn't that, the chiming have been a bit more melodious? But then I thought to myself, no, actually, that's perfect, because they're all going off, and he for whatever reason, maybe in all that chaos, he hears the music. Whereas the music of time. I know I'm reading maybe too much into it, but you're right. Like, if this were a prose work, I could see the author, like if somebody had been writing this, the novelization, of this episode, I could see someone really getting into this scene and describing the melody that's being played of sorts, while everybody else, of course, is just covering their ears.
Right. To them, it's just noise. To him, it's beauty.
I also like, and this is, another failure of the second season, but it's not happening here. We don't know what the final goal is for the Clock King. He's got a series of crimes, and Batman and Robin are trying to keep up with him throughout it. It's not just a matter of, we know what the crime is. We just got to catch him and keep up with him and catch him. No, we don't know what it is. Batman and Robin don't know what it is. And I love the fact that the Clock King gets a clock from an auction house, sends it to the jewelry store, robs the jewelry store. His next target, the auction house.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Because it's the one thing you wouldn't think of. It's like, all right, you bought the item from there, you obtained it from there, but that you're not going to actually go back and hit that place. And then again, there's another one of those, moments where we get what should be obvious to most people when Robin and Batman deduce that the man who bought the clock from the house is, his name is Kronos. And Robin,
right?
Because
Robin is apparently the only person in the world who knows Greek. Yes.
Oh, I love that, because then there's Mr. Parkhurst who runs the house there. He's like, "Oh, I would never have gotten that." And Batman looks at him a little too smugly. They're going, "Well, you're not trained in deduction like we are."
Yeah, it yet another piece of evidence in the case that Gotham City is where they send all the stupid people.
Well,
because really, it's not enough that he figures it out that way, but they've got to, shine a light on it by having Parkhurst sort of standing there in awe of their genius.
Yes. And I think, Batman's going to do this over the course of the rest of this season and the next season. There's going to be, I think this is the first time we get a sort of meta commentary on pop art.
For many years, the Parkhurst galleries have been known for their exhibitions and auctions of art that have stood the test of time. But now, Mr. Benson Parkhurst, the owner of the galleries, has bowed to the inevitable. And the galleries are having their first exhibit of pop art. And it seems to be a hit.
Out of the way, make way.
Something's happening.
This way, careful, gently. Wait a minute.
What is going on here?
What's going on here, my dear sir, is certainly not an exhibition of true pop art. This way. Out. Forward. Inferior. All definitely inferior.
And just who are you, sir?
Huh. I am Progress Pigment, the king of pop art and apostle of its culture. A little more to the left, boys. Now, I will let you have the honor of viewing my latest masterpiece. Off! I call it Time Out of Joint.
What is this?
This is certainly an incredible machine. It is really a work of art.
Get this junk out of here!
Junk! Do you realize what this is? You are looking at the symbolization of time. Time, the ever-moving balance wheel of the universe. Observe.
Because the gallery is holding an exhibition on pop art, giving in to the inevitable, as the news announcer is saying, at the event itself. But Batman at this point has been lauded as this great work of pop art, and now he's kind of mocking it a little bit with all the weird images and pictures and stuff all over the place.
And Clock King basically disguising himself as, for all intents and purposes, Andy Warhol.
Yes. Yeah.
Basically, well, it's like sort of a mix of Andy Warhol and Klaus Oldenburg, but I really enjoyed the heck out of that. It figures, all right, they're going to say we're pop art, let's do pop art.
Why, though, didn't Parkhurst recognize Clock King. I mean, I know he was wearing the goatee. I mean, Batman didn't recognize him either until...
Oh, I love their super sophisticated method of figuring out that it's Clock King by using a blue pencil to draw on a picture. My God, it's him! You know, like, I mean, yes, it's 1966 and we don't have facial recognition software, but damn! But I mean, that's a convention of the show all along. I mean, why don't people who stand next to Batman realize that that's Bruce Wayne's jaw and voice, you know? Or for that matter, recognize Dick Grayson under a ridiculously flimsy domino mask, you know? That's a convention of television in general and Batman in particular, that when somebody wears a mask, you don't recognize. I don't think that's any worse than any other case of it that we've seen on the show, of people disguising themselves.
Right.
The only person who was really perfect at it was Falseface, and that's because they hired different actors each time.
I'd also be willing to give Parkhurst the benefit of the doubt because he couldn't even remember the sale at first until he looked up his book.
Well, yeah, he runs an auction house. He sells a lot of things.
Right.
You know, that didn't bother me. People don't always have perfect recall, you know. Although, you know, I still love the whole, you know, I never would have figured that out. And Batman commending Robin on his study of foreign languages.
Yeah. I like, though, also, again, you know, it's these little touches that you don't see very often in Batman because they cut to the chase or they cheat you out of it. You know, Clock King shows up at the gallery, you know, at the exhibition and such, and he's got, you know, like you said, he's dressed up, you know, as a pop artist and such. He's got the beret on and the fake goatee and everything. And
the sunglasses.
And the sunglasses. And he's got this huge sculpture, and he props it up against this one particular wall, and it's a mechanical sculpture, so it's making all this noise, and smoke's coming out of it and everything. But meanwhile, while that's all going and the noise is going, nobody's hearing the drilling that the machine is doing into the wall as it cuts a hole that they're going to slip through. I mean, it's a nice touch that, again, don't see very often.
It's one of those tricks the villain pulled all too often on the show. It's something that you wonder why they don't notice it, and you actually this one actually works. You can understand why nobody notices because it's making so much noise and has so many moving parts. The fact that nobody notices it cutting through the wall is more convincing than other such contraptions have been on the show.
Oh yeah, no, it's you know, it's the whole look over here, kids, while I do this.
Yeah,
and it's perfect.
And this one actually worked.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask.
Unfortunately, we less convincing was the slinkies that he used to
incapacitate
hold Batman and Robin in place.
Well, before we get to that, I got to ask you a question. Would you eat burger with orange juice?
We're looking for someone who might be working here. Thelma Timepiece.
Oh, yes, Thelma. Sorry, Batman, you can't win them all. She quit last week. I think she went back to her hometown in the Midwest. But I'd be glad to take your order.
I am a little hungry.
Of course, Robin. Even crime fighters must eat. And especially you. You're a growing boy and you need your nutrition.
Hamburgers, medium rare.
May I recommend Bat Burgers?
Bat Burgers?
Trouble stealing your appetite.
Arrested with our new Bat Burger. I'm honored by this tribute, miss. 2 Bat Burgers, medium rare, and 2 glasses of orangeade, doubles.
Oh, God, no.
I thought
Orangeade. It wasn't even orange juice. It was orangeade.
Orangeade, yeah.
Although, and of course, you know, when they said, look, we have Bat Burgers, my first thought was, oh, wow, that's very interesting. I'm going to have my lawyers contact you very soon.
Yeah, you know, you'd think he'd be like, wait a minute, you're making $1 off my name? Those burgers better be damn good. I want to know what kind of beef you're using. Because, yeah, if somebody gets sick on a Bat Burger, they could blame Batman.
Yeah. The whole scene at the drive-in really didn't serve any purpose whatsoever. It felt like filler of the worst kind, except maybe they wanted to, you know, make fun of merchandising, I guess, because of the whole Bat Burger thing, and also have yet another vacuous female character talk about how cool Robin looks. But I love that. I love that bit when you know you got the couple in the convertible and they say, "Hey, look, it's Batman and Robin." And then as soon as the girl talks about how, you know, far out Robin is, the guy gets this look on his face for just a second. It's like, really? You're with me here. And it's just for half a second. Yeah, and I don't even know if that was like filmed or the guy thought the camera was off him or something. But the look of just disgust on his face as soon as she thought Robin was cool was hysterical.
You're right. It really serves no purpose because they could have easily just They could have just as easily done the scene from the Batcave. I mean, the whole setup was, let's go here because this is now where his former mole works as a waitress.
And she wasn't there anyway, so the lead didn't go anywhere.
Exactly, yeah. But I still liked it just because it's an outdoor shot. I'm always appreciative of outdoor shots, especially as the season, we move further into second season and into the third, where it's going to be a lot of studio shots, and it's a lot of cramped studio shots because they're cheapening out on the budget more and more. By the way, did you notice now, once they cut through the wall, Clock King and his men, first they knock out the crowd with like a sonic beam. They go into...
which I thought was cool. That was a little something different instead of, he didn't just use gas every time. He had a different MO.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. That was different. He goes in and there's all these rare paintings in a storage area, and he picks up this particular one that looks like a variation on, a dolly work.
Come, my good second hands. Careful with it, careful.
The persistent memory. Yeah. It's not that, but it's obviously supposed to be that.
It's supposed to be that. And actually, I didn't realize this, and I have to go back and look.
Right on schedule. We've completed another foolproof crime. Let's go.
You can only fool some of the people some of the time, Clock King.
Batman and Robin. At the men. I'll give a personal bonus to the first man who knocks out Batman.
4 against 2. I would say that the odds are in our favor, Robin.
Come on, fight, go!
According to IMDb, they said that there's actually melting Batman and Robin in there.
There was another piece that had Batman. There was a variation on an existing art piece with Batman and Robin in it also, but it was in the main gallery, though, not in the storage room. Right. I thought that was a nice touch. You get the feeling they wanted to actually name-check Dolly and couldn't get the rights or he wouldn't do it or something, but that was a nice touch. And I love the fact that after the big fight, because, of course, there has to be a big fight, Clock King was able to delay things by playing on Batman's desire to keep the precious treasures of the world safe. But please, we don't want to harm the picture. Let me go put it down. And Batman lets him, of course.
Batman lets him, but did you think that was like the oddest looks from Batman and Robin?
Wait, this valuable painting might be damaged. Isn't it beautiful?
As first they're gazing and sort of like deciding if the picture is really worth letting Clock King drop it.
Please, let me put it down so it won't be heard. Agreed? Agreed. Ooh, I seem to have hurt my wrist a little bit. Just give me a moment.
Anytime you're ready, Clock King.
Just give me a minute. A minute to touch my counterattack activator.
Holy mainspring! I can't move!
Perhaps I should have titled my creation The Dynamic Duel Caught in the Coils of Time.
The cops!
That'll be Chief O'Hara. I contacted him with a mobile bat phone on the way here.
Yeah, and he sort of bends over and like looks at it. It's like, yeah, okay, fine, we'll say.
But it sets up, he gets his watch, manages to drop it, which Batman and Robin didn't see, or maybe they did, but they were then too distracted by the coils of doom that Clock King shoots.
Evil slinkies!
Yes. Evil slinkies.
Yes.
But anytime they've done those kind of things, the coils or Joker's trick confetti, they never seem convincing as they struggle around it. But it is enough for them to escape Clock King and such because they hear the police sirens, and Batman turns to Robin and tells him, I called Chief O'Hara on the way. And I'm like thinking, he was sitting next to you.
Right there in the car with him. Yeah. Did he not notice?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that too. It's like, thanks, Batman. I was sitting right there. You didn't really need to tell me that. Also, he has a mobile bat phone, which proves that he's, several decades ahead of his time.
He didn't need to tell Robin, but he didn't need to tell the audience this. The police are coming. Okay.
Yeah.
So what?
No, they're coming. We can actually hear sirens, which you don't actually hear all that often on the show.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, we know they're coming. It's like, great. I mean, it didn't have to be, considering there was a news crew present, there's lots of ways that the police could have been alerted to the fact that something strange was going on.
They pick up the watch, Oh, look, he dropped this when he was massaging his hurt wrist, Robin says. I love that.
According to the Bat Chemical Analyzer, the dust in Clock King's watch contains aluminum oxide.
Is that important?
Indeed it is, Robin. Aluminum oxide is used in the manufacture of synthetic gems.
I still don't get it. How does that connect to Clock King?
It's obvious, Robin. Synthetic gems are widely used in jeweled watch movements.
Holy sundials, and you mean...
Exactly, Robin. Clock King's hideout
is a place where they make synthetic jewels for watches.
We're just feeding the necessary data into the Bat computer.
And, that's new, something different. So they, do a search in the city of who manufactures or produces or, distributes synthetic gems and such. And they find that this company that has, been closed for several months, TikTok something or other. And of course, wow, that once again.
Yes.
Yeah. Once again.
That actually was one rare case where Batman's deductive process actually was a proper deductive process.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree.
Because a lot of times the leaps in deduction that the pair of them make are far wide and impossible to cross. But and in fact, we'll get one in the very next episode with the whole Smith thing. But that one actually, I was impressed just because I bought that, that they figured that one out.
I just, once again, I don't know, it's the adult in me now. As a kid, it never seemed to bother me. I'm getting a little jaded with the whole, the villain hides in the most obvious spot. The Joker hides out in a gag store, or the Riddler hangs out in a puzzle shop, or, or Penguin hangs out in a fish store. It's
like they want to be caught,
Exactly. It's no longer just a matter of, oh, that's, part of his eccentricity. It's like, no, this is a mainstay of all villains. They have to stay in some sort of themed area that relates to who they are and their...
Although with the Clock King, at least, again, it's more convincing because we know he has that level of obsession about clocks. He wouldn't go anywhere else.
Okay, I'll give you that.
With the Joker, especially, it's even more with the more recurring villains. It's more of an issue because they keep doing it over and over again. In this case, I think we can forgive it, given that we know how completely focused this guy is on timepieces. He wouldn't have his hideout in. Of course, I don't know why they don't ever hide out in like an apartment.
So Batman and Robin race to the building and such. They decide to go in from the back. Smart move, Robin points out. They do a back climb up to the window, the entrance there, but before they make their way there, they are stopped for a moment.
It should be good practice if something ever takes us to Mount Everest, Batman.
I think we'll be confining our campaign against evil to Gotham City for some time to come, old chum. It needs us.
Hey, Batman and Robin, what are you guys doing?
Just routine crime fighting.
Well, would you like to come inside? I'm rehearsing.
Thank you, citizen, but our pursuit of justice allows us few diversions.
Oh, be seen.
Hi, Robin. Hey, you guys come and catch my act sometime. I dig yours. All right, fellas, one more time. From a whippoorwill.
Woohoo!
Sammy
Davis Jr.
Yeah,
Groovy, man.
Groovy.
Yeah, that was... Well, they were all gratuitous. What I especially love is that apparently this place that manufactures, watch parts also has rehearsal space.
Oh, I know. It's like the time Dick Clark had a party in Police Commissioner Gordon's headquarters. Yeah. It's like, what's going on in Gotham City?
They're not even trying.
I will say this much. The back climb was always just Adam West and Burt Ward walking along the floor, and whoever the window guest was, they kind of had to sort of sit up. They were lying down on the floor. So far out of the ones we've seen, Sammy Davis Jr.'s was the most convincing that he actually was,
looking out a window.
Leaning out a window, because when he leaned back, it didn't look like he was lying back down. He sort of was just going back in. It was the most convincing to date.
I also love the fact that basically Batman didn't recognize him.
Yeah.
I had no idea who the hell this guy was. It's like, no, go away, guy. We're doing work here.
It's true. Well, crime fighting doesn't allow him much time to, listen to Candyman and stuff like that.
Apparently not. No. And Bruce Wayne obviously never made it out to Vegas.
You know what? Maybe he's never had time to go to Vegas.
Yeah.
So they get inside, they see Clock King by himself, they approach him, but then they slip on the clockwork oil that he laid on the floor, which again, nice little touch.
Yes, and also proving, because it wasn't entirely obvious at first that he dropped the watch on purpose.
Yeah.
That was the one of those things, like, it could have been something he did by accident that led Batman to him, but given that he was waiting for them, obviously he dropped the watch on purpose, knowing that they would track it down to where he was, which was nice. I like the idea of the villain actually for once being a step ahead of Batman.
I like it too. And it was funny because when he first dropped the watch, it's been, ages since I watched the episode. My thinking was that the watch was actually going to explode and gas would come out or something. And that's how they'd get away, or that's how they'd catch him. I'd completely forgotten about it. So yeah, you're right. It was a nice touch that he was a step ahead. He had this plan. This was all to lure Batman into a trap.
Batman, we're inside a giant hourglass.
You grinning devils!
Looking for your utility belts? They're over here. Naturally, I removed them to prevent your escape.
Batman, stand! It's starting to pour down.
Your Highness, your alarm is ringing.
I'm well aware of it. Well, Dynamic Duo, we'll have to leave now if we're to keep to our timetable of crime. We certainly don't want to disappoint Mr. Smith, do we? After all, he's going to be of invaluable help to us at exactly 5 o'clock this afternoon. Some people kill time, but this time, time is going to kill you.
Is this the 0 hour for the dynamic duo? Are the sands of time really running out for Batman and Robin? At long last, have they met a gritty, granulated, inglorious fate? Tune in tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Which worked, of course.
And
like all good, he has Batman in his clutches and doesn't take his mask off.
Doesn't kill him directly because, again, I made a note of this about, like, why is it they don't do that? But you know what? Again, speaking to what you said earlier about this being, the Clock King and time and all this, he couldn't help himself. He'd have to do something like this, like, Batman having little time left to live and the sands of time falling on. It's perfectly Clock King.
Mm-hmm.
And it's perfectly big Bill Finger because it's a giant, hourglass.
Giant hourglass, yes. Although it still doesn't explain why he didn't take the mask off.
True.
Didn't take his utility belt off, which was actually, good thinking on his part. But
yeah.
And then left it there in the room, but yeah.
Did it seem to me like there wasn't enough sand in that hourglass to actually bury them?
Hard to tell, but as Batman himself pointed out, I think in part 2, it was also airtight, so they were going to suffocate eventually anyway.
Right. So it didn't matter. It didn't matter in that regard. The way to get out of it, as a kid, I always was bothered by it. I mean, it makes sense and everything. I don't know. Maybe because they didn't have the utility belt or all. I don't know. I just didn't find it so spectacular that...
I actually thought the method of escape wasn't bad in the abstract. The execution left a bit to be desired, in particular the part where the hourglass fit perfectly through the door.
Well, it had to get in there in the first place. Yeah,
but it would have gone in 90 degrees from that. You could just bring it in that way. The way they were going out the long way. The fact that the headquarters, the hideout rather, happened to have a door wide enough to accommodate the hourglass at its longest made no sense. And of course, there happened to be a truck barreling down the street. But
Well, yeah, I mean, that was convenient that the truck was there. But I don't know. I mean, like, if that was the loading dock for the company, I don't know. To me, the door size didn't bother me that much.
And also knocking it on its side. They didn't actually mention it, which surprised me. But knocking on its side like that stopped the sand moving, which gave them extra time.
Right. Exactly.
And fewer distractions. So.
Exactly.
So it was useful in that regard at the very least. And I love the fact that they spend the next, like, 10, 15 minutes of episode time constantly, like, digging sand out.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah. Whoever directed that episode has been to the beach a lot. So, yeah.
Even in those scenes, like you were saying, and we're going to get to that in a moment, when they're going back and forth, every once in a while, Adam West would reach over and just dust a little bit more off him.
Just such a nice touch.
It was.
Yeah.
We cut to Police Commissioner Gordon's headquarters.
I know I'm intruding on two very busy officials.
Intruding, Mrs. Cooper? My door is always open to a lady as charming as yourself. And we do have Bruce Wayne in common, don't we?
Upstanding citizen.
Well, Bruce is really the reason I'm here. You see, today is his birthday. And while I was downtown shopping, I thought I'd drop by and see if I couldn't coax you into coming to a little surprise party for him at Wayne Manor tonight.
You won't have to twist my arm, Mrs. Cooper. I'd be delighted.
I'll second that.
Good. Shall we say 7-ish? Very informal. And bring your wives, of course.
When they get the call.
Because the police commissioner and the chief have nothing better to do than to take meetings with little old ladies, because God knows they're not doing any police work.
Well, Batman's out there doing it, and he's checking in. You know, he checks in to let them know that they got out of the trap there and such. And of course, like I said, it sets us up perfectly, because Aunt Harriet even gets in her little dig about, thank God we've got Batman and Robin here. No offense,
I know you people can't do your jobs. Yeah.
Well, look at you.
Oh, no offense. Yes.
You're sitting around here listening to old ladies talk about birthday parties.
Yes.
Oh, man. I don't know. The one thing I also was, again, I know I'm being silly about this, but, you know, the bat phone goes off and Aunt Harriet looks over, and why she doesn't say, wow, that sounds like Bruce's hi-fi.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And I love the hesitation there when the bat phone goes off. It's like, it looks like Gordon's like, is she supposed to know about this?
Yeah. Is this the proper time to take a call from Batman with Mrs. Cooper here? But they're going to attend, and so off she goes, all happy with herself that, you know, she's done her job for the day. We cut back to Clock King, and, you know, he's satisfied in the fact that he's eliminated Batman, so he needs to move ahead now with his plan. And that includes going to Bruce Wayne's and stealing his collection of antique fob watches, which, again, nice little touch. It's just, you know, again, with the whole timepiece thing. But we've got a problem. Like you said, our goons who aren't too smart there, one of them managed to put the wrong button on a clock that Clock King sold to Aunt Harriet. He put the button for, and I got to read this because I kept saying it so many different ways, the atomic energy directional control switch.
Whatever the hell that is, yes.
But what I'm getting is, what I'm trying to figure out is, it's a button. So does that mean that if the button were pressed there, the device that Clock King is holding would go off?
You have now put more thought into this than Bill Finger and his collaborator did. Because, damn, yeah, that was just, yes, it's the wrong button. Like, couldn't you have at least said the wrong mechanism just to, you know, make it a little convincing? But no, apparently just the act of putting the wrong button on completely ruins it. And this is one of the flaws of the episode, is that the Clock King apparently has psychic powers, because twice he set someone up to buy something, but what if somebody else had bought it? What if Aunt Harriet wasn't the one who bought the thing? What if the jeweler wasn't the one who bought the clock from the auction house? There was no guarantee that that was going to happen, or that somebody else wouldn't come along and outbid them or get to it before them, you know?
Well, the outbidding I could definitely see, but as far as, you know, he probably timed it perfectly that, you know, if it was a matter of just timing the buy, it would have happened. But you're right. I mean, if it's...
But what if Aunt Harriet decided, no, I don't want to get that clock?
Yeah, that's true.
Or found another clock she liked better. You know, there were so many random factors in his plans, which doesn't make sense from somebody who, like the Clock King, who's supposed to be that meticulous. That's a lot of random chance, and that just that bugged me a little. That he left. There were so many ways that plans could have gone awry because of circumstances that were completely out of his control.
Well, I mean, for that matter, you know, right here, his flunky who manages to put the wrong button. I mean, he never. But
you know, it's hard to find good help.
But you know what though, for someone like,
which we've established is populated entirely by doofuses,
right? But for someone who is so meticulous, he's able to adapt because, again, it changes his timetable. Now they must hurry to Wayne Manor and get that clock before anybody pushes the button.
Yes.
Yeah.
And blows up China or whatever it is that happens when you push the button. They were a little unclear on the consequences of the button pushing, but obviously it's like crossing the streams. It would be bad.
Well, see, that's the thing. I didn't get the impression because later he explains that the button was part of the device that was going to shoot the gas that was going to stop the pilots of the helicopter so that they could steal the clock from them. And this is later on. But why then is it called an atomic energy? Because that just sounds even more ominous.
Yeah.
You know?
It sounded like it was a bomb.
Exactly, yeah.
Not a method of delivering gas.
Right. Other than the directional control.
Right.
And this is where, and you and I both said, this is where we get the whole scene.
Anyway, here it is. Our entire file on crooks named Smith.
Good. I'll feed them into the Bat computer and see if we can get the data on the mysterious Mr. Smith Clock King mentioned.
I sure hope so. Boy, what I'd give to know where the Clock King is right at this very minute.
Meanwhile, up in the Wayne living room.
Meanwhile, down in the Batcave, we've got Batman and Robin working on, another clue that Clock King had dropped when he mentioned Smith. And meanwhile, up above in Wayne Manor, we got Clock King stealing the fob watches, knocking Alfred out,
and knocking Alfred out in a spectacularly unconvincing manner.
Right.
I mean, he barely touched him.
Well.
And down he goes.
The atomic energy directional control switch is intact.
I'm sure sorry about that mistake, Your Highness.
While I'm here, I might as well pick up that valuable collection of antique pocket watches.
I thought you said there wasn't a minute to lose.
It won't take long.
Although I did like them, then hitting him in the stomach so he'd bend over so they could seat him in the chair.
Meanwhile, down in the Batcave.
Gosh, if we get the correct information, we'll have the Clock King right where we want him.
Meanwhile, up in the Wayne living room.
It certainly gives William Dozier a lot to do.
Meanwhile, down in the Batcave.
It won't be long now, Batman.
Meanwhile, up in the Wayne living room.
Meanwhile, down in the Batcave. Meanwhile, in the Wayne living room.
Yes.
Back. And honestly, it would have done a better job of creating tension if we didn't have William Dozier doing it.
Time is of the essence. Let's go. Good afternoon.
Bruce's birthday clock. What are you doing here? Who are you? Help! Alfred! Alfred! Help! Alfred!
A little old lady, Your Highness.
Dick Grayson's aunt. I think we better take her along with us.
Alfred!
Meanwhile, down in the Batcave.
Why, it's Alfred's burglar alarm.
There must be trouble upstairs.
You may be right about that, but it also, and this is the script writing and stuff, I could see this in, a comic book.
Yes.
I see them cutting. I mean, not today. Not today.
No.
Not today. That would be just really clumsy in today's comic book world and such. But in the 50s and 60s, I could see the little, box blurbs back and forth going like that. And we get the use of the steam pole, activating thing, which was
compressed steam. Yes.
The compressed steam, which was first introduced in the Batman movie.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
The nice thing about the movie was that in addition to obviously the Batboat and the Batcopter and all that stuff, there were some tweaks done to the Batcave. We get Alfred's elevator, which he comes out. That was first shown in the movie. And we get the compressed steam, bat lift taking them back up to Wayne Manor. And of course, they come out as Bruce and Dick to confront Clock King and his men. Because,
they can't really have Batman, in Bruce Wayne's house, that would raise questions.
That would raise questions. And I like the fact, because there was that little part of me that was like, why isn't Aunt Harriet fussing or being upset or questioning the fact that, you know, Dick took a swing at one of the goons and such, but she was in such a state that it worked.
And they did a nice job of not, they just sort of took a couple of quick swings that didn't look like a superhero. It looked like a guy defending, you know, a member of his family. And they didn't chase him, you know. So I think you know, what they did was enough to be convincing as something Bruce and Dick might do if they got their dander up, but not so much so that it would be suspicious. Like, why are you getting into fist fights when you're, you know, a Playboy millionaire and a dumb kid?
Yeah.
They towed that line decently, I thought.
They head back down to the Batcave, and here's where
back in costume.
Back in costumes, and here's where, like you said, your part where you didn't buy the deduction as much. Where
not as much, no.
Where Batman figures out that Smith, as in blacksmith.
Right, because there are so many of those these days. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Although once they come to that conclusion, I'm fine with them figuring out that, you know, the target is the tower, the clock tower with the
it's the jump to blacksmith that I had the issue with. Yes, you're right. Once you accept that jump, then the further process, yes, that worked, because there is a blacksmith in the clock tower, right across from the helicopter pad. Gabby.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's Clock King, so that makes sense.
And A, that it's in a clock tower, and B, that there's a cesium clock being delivered. And it's like, when he calls Commissioner Gordon to find out, you know, if there's something going to be on the helicopter at 5 o'clock, on the helipad rather, at 5 o'clock, and he mentions, oh yes, there's a cesium clock being taken. We didn't think it was very routine. We didn't think to take any special precautions. Friggin' Clock King is in town. Anything clock related, you should take precautions on.
Well, more than that, you know, Batman goes into some explanation as to what a cesium clock can do, and it has to do with the military and satellites. And I was kind of...
And it's worth $1 million.
Right. And I was kind of disappointed at the fact that, in the end, Batman figures out that Clock King will hold it for ransom. And I'm like thinking, you've got something that in some way ties in with the satellites over our planet. That, to me, sounds more intimidating. But no, it's for money?
Well, the thing is, like you said before, there isn't a grandiose plan there. I don't think he has one. He just likes clocks. You know? I don't think Clock King wants to take over the world, unlike, you know, some of the others. He did, or you know, rule Gotham or whatever. He just wants more clocks.
Okay.
You know?
I guess it makes it all the more a shame then, because it's like you've got this powerful clock, so to speak, and it's just there because it's a cool timepiece for a collector of timepieces. Because I was getting into it. I'm like, he's like, oh, the satellites and stuff. And I'm like, oh, he's going to do something. No, he's going to ransom it. Once again, we get more drawings on the Bat computer. State-of-the-art Bat computer, and we get pictures. I'm sorry, I know.
Like, yeah, you go through all that trouble of like digging around, finding the slide, opening the drawer, putting the slide in, and it's a very mediocre drawing.
Right.
Like, didn't even get photographs.
I get flack from some of my other guests who are like, come on, it's cool. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a computer.
No, it isn't.
I want an actual picture of the clock tower, not a drawing. Drawing probably by Robin.
Yeah, probably. It's part of his art studies.
Yes. This second part moves along very quickly. And we're already to the end here where Batman and Robin race to the clock tower. Clock King reveals his whole plan that, you know, the directional control switch is supposed to release gas from the clock tower across to the heliport where, you know, the helicopter is landing with the cesium clock. Clock King and his men will dress up as maintenance guys on the tower there on the heliport and will steal the clock once everybody is knocked out. But Batman and Robin burst in and...
No. It can't be true. You're dead. You have to be dead.
Maybe we're living on borrowed time.
But now it's roundup time.
Batman, look, his gun! Holy merry-go-round! That wild shot has started the Clockworks movie.
Get them before they get you.
Again, bat fight for the end. With, again, Clock King fight music.
Yes.
You know. And something else I noticed, I didn't pick up the first time in the first Bat fight, but I caught here, and we're seeing this also more and more. Clock King doesn't fight.
No.
No, but a lot of these second season new villains don't get in the mix. They stay in the background with their mole.
Yes, I'm a famous actor. I'm not getting involved in fisticuffs.
Yeah.
And they were. I mean, Sleazak was a very well-regarded character actor. You know, and he's not going to sully his hand.
Now, here's one question. During the course of the fight, there's a scene there where Robin is pinned down by one of the goons, and they're on the rotating, you know, thing with all the statues.
Yeah.
Batman is standing on what looks to be one of the podium parts for one of the statues. Did he take that? I have to go back and look at...
Where'd it go?
Where'd it go? How did he manage to lift a statue so quickly? Because those things weren't paper mache. This is an intricate timepiece here and such. That's got to be a stone work at least.
More fundamental than that.
5 o'clock. Not bad for timing, huh, Batman?
Yes, Robin. And that clock's tolling the end of Clark King's crimes.
Why did he go to the trouble so he could impersonate the statue and stand still long enough for him to come around and then punch the guy?
Yeah.
When his youthful ward is sitting there getting his ass kicked?
Yes.
But he has to go through this elaborate thing in order to look cute when he saves him? I mean, what the hell, man?
Hang on, old chum.
Yeah.
I'm getting the statue down.
And then just standing there pretending to be a statue when there's a fist fight going on. It's like... And man, the inability to disguise Burt Ward's stunt double was far worse in that one than it was in the gallery one in part one. The hair was the worst because the hair was flying all over the place, and then you cut in for the in-depth shot, and of course Burt Ward's hair is perfect and not out of place at all, and then you cut back and it's flying all over the place.
Oh yeah, there's one there. You mentioned the cut in where he leaps up on top of a guy, piggyback. And, wide shot, it's the stunt double. Then they cut to the close-up as he sort of bops him, and the guy starts to topple. And they cut back to the wide shot as he completes the fall, so this way the stunt double can land safely on his... And I'm like thinking, Burt Ward could have handled that shot. I mean, the guy was, acrobatic enough, had karate skills and stuff. He could have handled that landing. I don't know why they bothered with the stunt double for that, but...
Maybe insurance, maybe.
Yeah. But we end, with Clock King and Millie both captured and the goons as well. And we get an epilogue scene. Sadly, the life of a crime fighter is to even learn that, you won't have a surprise party because the surprise is slipped.
Yes.
So sad.
Oh, it's both the upside and the downside of having a secret identity,
Right.
And of course he says, oh, well, we of course were invited, which was a lie.
He doesn't miss a beat, and Burt Ward does a fairly good job of trying to hide his disappointment, like, oh, damn,
Although I was kind of disappointed that they didn't use the party, because when Harriet first mentioned the surprise party, I thought, okay, the whole idea will be that Clock King will try to rob the place during the party, and, to me, that was an opportunity there to have, there's Bruce Wayne having his birthday party, and here comes somebody robbing it, and he can't get away to change the Batman because there's all these people around. And then we didn't even get to see the damn party.
Yeah.
But then again, that would have required a budget.
And, extra actors.
Unless the only people who showed up at the party were Gordon and O'Hara. Wow, great party there, Aunt Harriet. 2 whole people. Thanks.
No, Aunt Harriet, we want to see more of you. So as we wrap up this episode here, let's, touch base on a few things here. First off, Clock King himself. I think both you and I agree, that this was a pretty decent villain especially for a second season villain.
Yeah. Given the plethora of famous people who wanted to be on Batman and were given very unconvincing villain roles, this one actually was one of the upper tier of them. He did a nice job. He really got into the part. He didn't feel like he was phoning it in. I especially loved when he laughed at his own joke when he referred to Robin as the boy blunder and paused for a second to laugh at how incredibly witty that was.
Yes.
And he did the obsession without overplaying it. You know, I mean, the clocks were obviously very important to him, but he didn't go over the top with it. It wasn't on the same level as the way Vincent Price did all the egg references, for example. You know, and it helped that it was also, a villain that actually did come from the comics, written by the guy who created him, which probably had something to do with why the villain worked as well. And he played him well. He was sufficiently villainous and a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree with you about the whole, but when Vincent Price does it and he's so over the top, you don't mind.
Oh, no, because it's Vincent frickin' Price.
Right.
Now, but even when I was a kid, I thought the egg references were overdone. It was like, all right, we get it,
Yeah. And what I didn't realize was that Walter Slezak was, I looked him up, IMDb and all that kind of stuff there. He basically was known for two types of roles. He either did musical comedies in the theater, or he did actually play baddies in movies and TV shows. But I'm looking at it, and one of his most notable roles was he played the Nazi captain who had sunk the boat in Lifeboat, the Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Yes.
I'd completely forgotten about that. Now I want to go back and revisit that movie.
Yeah. Well, it's a great movie anyway.
Great. No, it's a great movie anyway, but just to see Slezak's portrayal there. Sadly, he's another one, and we have several of these in the Batman television show history. He's another one of the character actors who played villains who took his own life.
Yeah.
You know? Over health conditions, though, over health issues, not about his career. But I think we have two others that I recall, one who did it because of health and one who did it because his career wasn't going the way he hoped for it to go.
Yeah.
Which is sad. I just don't want anybody getting the idea, though, of the Batman curse, because, we mentioned Bill Finger. His co-writer in the episode was Charles Sinclair, and both of them had actually written episodes of 77 Sunset Strip. Sinclair didn't have much, though, of a resume of TV shows, and this is the only Batman episode he does as well. So let me ask you, any Bat gadgets in this episode that stand out to you?
There was the stuff in the car. They had, why he couldn't call it a television, called it some other bat thing when they were watching the news while they were eating lunch.
Right.
And the facial recognition thing and the slideshow thing. I mean, there weren't any particularly outrageous gadgets that I recall this time. It was all fairly standard, their usual run-of-the-mill bat gadgets, as opposed to any particularly special ones that I can recall.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on the stuff on the dashboard, the TV. I got a kick out of the fact that he pushed a button to open up, a compartment to remove a pen.
Yes.
I thought that was a bit extreme, but I still got a kick out.
You don't want the pen rolling around in the Batmobile,
Yeah.
Things get cushions, they get between things,
The trivia question from the unofficial Bat book from Joel Eisner is pretty simple, though. I mean, whose birthday were they celebrating? Yeah. Hey,
hang on, let me think on that.
They can't all be,
It was Alfred, right?
Alfred, there you go.
Oh, wait, a bat gadget I forgot about. Alfred keeps a burglar alarm in his belt buckle.
That's true.
Yes.
There you go.
I had forgotten about that.
That's cool. All right. So now you are Robin. It's the end of the episode. You've watched it with Batman. You turn to him and exclaim, "Holy!" You forgot about this part, didn't you?
I totally forgot about this one. Yes. Holy sands of time, Batman.
Okay. So overall, you'd say you enjoyed it, though.
Oh yeah. Like I said, when you were throwing out episodes for us to grab, the reason I went for this was because not so much any particular recollection of the episode, because I didn't have a very strong recollection of it one way or the other, but it was because I liked the villain. I always thought the Clock King was of the various Batman gimmick villains, I thought he was one of the more interesting ones. And I was curious to see how, after all these years in particular of seeing, in particular the Alan Rachins version on the Batman animated series of the 90s and the Robert Knepper version on Arrow this past season, how Walter Slezak held up to that. Having said that, it was very enjoyable, especially, as I said, by the standards of the let's bring in a famous person to be a villain theme that we had in the second season. Very enjoyable, and I was very pleasantly surprised to see that it was co-written by the guy who co-created Batman. That was just cool. I'm
pretty much of the same agreement. I said holy timing was what I wrote. I mean, this is a well timed episode. It feels more like a first season episode in many respects. I mean, there are certain things that are second season conventions, but
like Sammy Davis Jr.
Well, no, Sammy Davis Jr. Yeah, definitely. That's a second season convention. Some of the shortcuts they took second season conventions. The lack of Batman fight music is a second. You know, we're getting into that now where they're varying it up to try and keep things. They're thinking they're doing it fresh, but sometimes I think they're missing what some of the kids look forward to is actual bat fight music. I discovered in talking with other people who, you know, have siblings or cousins or whatever that they watch the show with, that most of the time they really weren't watching the bat fight when the bat fight started. They were fighting themselves as the fight went on. But it's well timed in the sense that it's paced well. It's a solid first episode. There's a lot going on, and then the second episode moves very quickly, like it should. It should rush towards the inevitable ending of the episode and such. The dropping of time phrases and cliches and such are well timed. It's not overdone, like you said, like with Egghead. It will be in the Egghead.
Although Batman's line at the end about how, you know, he tried to make time serve him and now he's serving time was particularly egregious, even by end of the show bad pun standards. That was
But overall, yeah, I have to say I can happily put this up there as one of the better episodes, probably even one of the top episodes of the second season so far.
I agree.
So as we come to the end of this episode, Keith, fill us in. What's going on with you in your world? How can people keep up with you if they want to follow along?
The easiest way to properly cyberstalk me is to go to DeCandido.net. That includes links to my various bits of online presence, including my blog, my Facebook page, my Twitter feed. I'm very heavily involved in several other podcasts here on the Chronic Rift Network, including the Chronic Rift itself, as well as my own podcast, Dead Kitchen Radio, which is a more or less monthly podcast about my own work. And I've also contributed not only to this one, but also to the Bionic podcast here and there, to Cyborgs, rather. Yeah. And my most recent book that's out is Klingon Art of War, which is a book set in the Star Trek universe, which is a guide to how to live your life as a proper warrior. There's actually recent episodes of both Dead Kitchen Radio and the Chronic Rift where I talk about that. I've got a story out in the new anthology, Badass Fairies, It's Elemental, which was just released by Dark Quest Books. I've got a module in the Firefly Echoes of War role-playing game that Margaret Weiss Productions has done. The module's called Merciless. Hasn't been released yet, but it will be soon. I've got a bunch of things coming out this fall, including a short story in Jonathan Mayberry's Out of Tune anthology, which is a collection of short stories that are inspired by sea ballads, in particular, like the child ballads, that kind of thing. Mine is based on the Mermaid Ballad. And I've got a short story coming out in a superhero anthology called With Great Power, which is an SCPD story that's edited by John French and Greg Schauer. And the big thing I've got coming out this fall is a novel based on the TV show Sleepy Hollow. It's called Children of the Revolution, and it's going to be published by Broadway Books in September, right in time for the second season of Sleepy Hollow to start. That was a lot of fun to do, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that book come out. And also, finally, Boom Studios has finally released the rest of the Farscape comic book in trade paperback. The War for the Uncharted Territories was a 12-part story that we did for basically the last year of the Farscape ongoing comic. They had released a trade paperback that included the first 4 issues of that, and then they lost the license expired, and so the last 8 issues were never reprinted. They did a deal with Henson to put out a new trade paperback that has all 12 issues. So that's just out now, so you can get the entire War for the Uncharted Territories arc in one trade paperback. Again, go to DeCandido.net. It'll link you to my blog, Facebook page, Twitter feed, my Star Trek Deep Space Nine rewatch, which is still going twice a week on Tor.com. I'm now into the 5th season, and all that good stuff. So
all that good stuff, yeah. And we'll have links as well in the show notes for people to follow along as well. Keith, thanks again so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's fun. It really is fun rewatching these episodes years later. I mean, I grew up watching Batman. You know, well, you and I both grew up in New York in the 70s. Remember when Channel 11 did they showed the Adam West Batman, they showed the George Reese Superman, and then they showed the Clayton Moore Lone Ranger back to back to back.
Right.
And I mean, that was my childhood. You know, and it's fun revisiting it now. You know, 30 years later.
30 years later. Well, we're going to revisit it again in another 2 weeks as the person we were just talking about, Egghead, is going to premiere. It's the first Egghead episode, the first episode with Vincent Price. And, you know, to do this episode justice, I have to ask another person who has a very interesting perspective on television and pop culture in general. He really opened my eyes to certain episodes of The $6 Million Man when he appeared on the show, so I had to bring him in for this. That being Dr. Arnold T. Blumberg. He of the G2V podcast and Doctor of the Dead will be joining us here for our look at Egghead, and that'll be in 2 weeks' time.
Sure, that will be an excellent episode.
Yes, it will.
Sorry, I had to get that in.
So until next time, citizens, thanks so much for listening. Take care, chums. Take care, Keith.
Good night.
Thanks for listening, chums. I don't have a bat phone, but you can contact the Batcave podcast through its Facebook page, Twitter, email at thebatcavepodcast@gmail.com, or by phone at 888-866-9010. Subscribe to the podcast via Libsyn.com, that's LIBSYN.com, or through iTunes. The Batcave Podcast is part of a series of pop culture podcasts from the Chronic Rift Network. Find them at chronicrift.com. So until next time, citizens, same bat time, same Batcave Podcast.
And I find it only fitting that Clock King, who made time serve his crimes, must now serve time himself.
Well put,